Hey everyone, this is Asad, and today we are going to make a multiplayer web-based game using 3JS and Playroom Kit. Playroom Kit is a SDK that allows you to make multiplayer games, and it manages all the state management. It syncs the state across the players. It has very low latency. It has no backend, and it manages all your players, and it has built-in UI to allow players to join the rooms and create the rooms and all that stuff. So let's get started. So I have this simple game written by Code Drops for this article, and it's essentially a airplane game written in 3JS, and where it lets you control the airplane using a mouse. Let me show you. So I have this running here locally, and I modified it to use joystick instead. So I'm using a library called nipple.js, and let me actually run this first to show you how it looks like. So I'm running this local HTTP server, and then what I'll do is I'll run this local host here, and if you can see, this is a simple game where you can control this airplane using your joystick. So let's look at the code. It's a pretty simple 3JS game. Creates a scene, and then a camera, renderer, handle some screen resize things, create some lights, a pilot. If you can see there's a pilot here, an airplane. It takes in the color, and then let's just actually set the color of this airplane. Right now it's red. Create a sky, sea, clouds, and all that stuff. Some helper methods here. And then what we are essentially doing is we create this joystick. So if you can see this joystick, which can be used by mouse or touch. And what we are doing is setting the joystick values to a global variable, and then setting the variable to undefined when we lift off our fingers from the joystick. Pretty simple. And then we create all this stuff. We set the color to red, and then we call the loop. The loop is essentially reading the current joystick values and then incrementing and decrementing the plane positions. So for left, we are doing the minus, for right, we're doing some plus, up and down similarly. And then some other stuff like moving the sea waves, and moving the sky, and then that's it. That's all. So let's convert this game into a multiplayer game. So what you want to do is you have two methods to add Playroom to your game. If you're using npm, you can install it using npm, or you can directly use it from CDN. So I'll just use the CDN here and copy these parts here into my index. Just paste those here, and then I can just copy these parts into my main like this. And so what you want to do is, let's see how Playroom works. So let's just call this insert coin, which is like the main function of the Playroom. So instead of creating all this stuff first, we'll call insert coin first, and it's a promise. So let's add await in front of it, and let's see what we get. So I'll refresh, and automatically you get this UI where the player gets to choose their avatar, which are randomly generated. They can choose their name, and then some colors, and then they can also invite others. So you can copy the link, and let's add a split at the bottom and open it in a new tab. So as you can see, these two players are in the same room now. Pretty cool. Let's launch this game. So what happens is you get this, your game is launched, but we don't see the other players because we haven't implemented anything for this. We just called the main function. So let's do that. Let's refresh this again. So to do that, what you want to do is handle the player joining and quitting. So let's do that. Instead of creating a hard coding an airplane and creating it here, let's add a plane when the player joins. So instead of so let's say what I'll do is I'll create an airplane here locally, and then what I can do is, instead of having it hard coded to a red color, what I want to do is get the player's chosen color. So on player join has this player state thing, which gives you this get profile. So what I can do is get profile on this, and then it has this color thing, and then it has this hex thing, which is what 3JS requires for this. Then this gives us a player airplane, and then what we want to do is, instead of having a global airplane variable here, we'll have a players array. So let's go back here, and then players dot push. We'll do an airplane, and we'll also push the state. One thing we want to do is we also want to remove this airplane when the player quits. So state has this on quit handler, so we'll call that, and when the player quits, we'll remove them from the scene and also filter our list. That's pretty much it. We'll need to do some more changes before we can actually run this game. Because if we run it right now, you'll probably see some errors. It'll probably crash. So if you see, it says that there's no airplane in the loop. So what we want to do now is, instead of setting these input variables and state as a global variable, we want to send these to Playroom. So let's say I want to send this direction thing to so I have this my player here, and what I want to do is set the input state to this and move this part here. And similarly, when I have no direction, I just remove this direction when we lift off the joystick. So we have that. We set it to a state called input, and what we want to do next is we still want to fix our loop, which we are seeing error for. So instead of directly accessing airplane here, we want to access it from the loop. So what we want to do is want to run a loop here of players, and then let's fetch the controls for this player first, and so player.state, and then we call get state on this, and the name of the state was input, and then we also tackle the undefined parts here, and so control is always defined, and then so this solution is good actually. We also don't want to use this global plane position. We also want to set it to the playroom state. Let's do that, and now let's copy these ifs into this loop. This isn't actually not a constant. Let's see. You're setting everything up correctly, and then at the end, what we want to do is want to move the plane, obviously, but the airplane here is player.airplane, which we set earlier. We also want to update the position back to the global playroom state. So we just do this, and then we can probably remove all this. Yes. So let's see what happens. Launch the game, and if you notice, I can actually change the color here, and then the plane will be of the player color. This is awesome. Now let's try to run two games. Let's try to add a player. So I'll copy this, add a split at the bottom, and then add my player here, and I'll choose blue for this player. This one. Launch the game. If you notice, it works. It works perfectly. But if you notice this, there's this jerky motion here. That's because both of these players are trying to read the input and then set it to the player position of each other, and so there's a conflict here. We want one of them to actually do this, not both. This is a problem. So to fix this, what we want to do is have different logic for host, which is like the first player, and the others. So to do that, Playroom has this helper method called isHost, which is true when this loop is running on the host. So if I do isHost here, I can do anything that I can actually do host stuff, which is write to the state, which only the host should be doing to avoid conflicts. So let me paste all this here, and then what others would be doing is just reading the values from the playroom and moving the plane on their screen. Essentially this. See, yeah. This should essentially fix the problem we are having. Let me close this again. Let's restart this. Open the link again, some color, then launch this game. So yeah, this fixes it. And there you have it. One thing to note here is that Playroom is handling all of the networking parts of this. So right now it's sending all this state across using WebRTC, which is faster but sometimes unreliable. And then if that's not available, Playroom automatically sends data using WebSockets, which are sometimes slower, but they are reliable. Yeah. Thank you.